I'm Eduardo Maruyama from IFPRI. This is joint work with my colleagues Yan Liu, Samson de Lleno Aredo, and Weilun Shi from IFPRI, and Kelvin Mulungu from ICIPE. And it's a study on promoting the adoption of push-pull technology among maize farmers in Uganda. Let's see. And I apologize if you hear some background noise. My daughter is leaving for school right now, and she's usually pretty loud. So for context, let me tell you about the challenge of fall armyworm in Africa. As you all know, one of the main priorities in Africa is increasing crop productivity. And one of the main challenges for this are crop pests and diseases, which are severely constraining this productivity. In particular, the fall armyworm, which arrived to Africa in around 2016 from the Americas, has become a major threat there to food production and food security. The control of fall armyworm in the region relies mainly on synthetic insecticides, which, because of its cost and also the required knowledge to apply it, is limiting adoption by smallholders. Also, the overuse of these insecticides can pose health and environmental risks and also drives pest resistance. So an alternative to these synthetic insecticides to control the fall armyworm in the region is to use integrated crop and pest management practices. In our case, we're going to talk particularly about push-pull technology, which was developed by ICIPE, which involves intercropping maize with desmodium and bracharia grass, and it effectively reduces the fall armyworm infestations and striga, and also increases maize yields and supports long-term pest control. So how does the push-pull technology work? And a full disclosure, I'm an economist, so I feel a little bit weird explaining this or describing this to an audience of plant specialists and agronomists. So you all probably understand this much better than I do, but anyway. So what we have here in this figure is you can see the maize, which is intercropped with desmodium, and then on the sides of the plot you'll have the bracharia grass, like as in all the borders of the plot. And basically how this works is that the desmodium emits an odor that will repel the fall armyworm. And the bracharia grass actually in this case also helps to repel the fall armyworm, but it also attracts natural enemies, other insects that will combat or eat basically the fall armyworm. So this is the way the system operates. Initially, the push-pull technology was developed to work against the stem borer, and that's where its original name comes, because in the case of the stem borer, the desmodium again is the push plant, but the bracharia actually pulls the stem borer, attracts the stem borer, and then traps it with the sap it has on its stems and basically kills it. But through trials, it was discovered that the push-pull technology is also very effective against the fall armyworm. So what is the existing evidence on the effectiveness of the fall armyworm? There has been several trials, the biggest ones in Kenya and some in Uganda, conducted already, and basically the agronomic impact of the push-pull technology has been to reduce the infestations of the fall armyworm and striga. It also improves soil fertility and moisture retention. The desmodium has nitrogen fixing properties, so it actually helps long-term soil health for the maize plots. Also in long-term trials, it has been reported 30 to 50% maize yield gains over conventional systems. This translates into economic impact. In particular, it because of the increase in yields and the reduced vulnerability to pests, it's very profitable. Farmers that adopt it are like it a lot, and they think it's very effective, especially when paired with fertilizer and striga resistant maize. The initial costs are high because you need to invest in the inputs, into the desmodium and the bracharia, prepare the plots, and also so you need also to put extra labor in the preparation at the beginning of the when you set up the push-pull plot. But once that is done, the sustained productivity and higher incomes basically offset any initial cost and make it more than profitable. Now, in terms of gender and social impact, the technology is labor saving overall, as after the initial labor effort, it actually reduces plowing and weeding effort just because uh, um, there's less pest to control, so there's less striga, less weeding that you need to do, which allows then farmers to target their labor into the harvest stage. Then the evidence so far has shown that the workloads fall for everyone, but it falls a little more for men than women. However, it also shows that the impact on it has that the technology has a positive impact on outcomes typically favored by women, as it would be children's educations and children's goods. Also, when asked about their preference for different type of technologies, in most cases, these are gender neutral, meaning that both men and women equally prefer the technology. But in the case of the push-pull technology, it's much more favored by women. So, given all these advantages and positive characteristics of the technology, one would expect adoption to be high, but in fact, and as is the case with a lot of new technologies that require specialized knowledge and specific inputs, the adoption tends to be low so far. And why is this the case? Limited farmer awareness, access to training and support always plays the biggest role here in limiting adoption. In most of the countries in the region, we are going to have rather weak and also very understaffed extension systems, and these limit the information flow and technology diffusion. Then on top of that, there are going to be gender gaps in access to resources, training, and leadership roles that will further limit women's participation and adoption in the new technology. So any effort to increase adoption of push-pull technology and in general any new type of these integrated pest management systems will need to have at least one or all of these elements that I'll describe. First, a good system of working with lead farmers, as experienced farmers can share the pest management knowledge locally in a very effective and efficient way. Also, participatory approaches in the way the technology is disseminated so that it's adapted to local needs and the cultural context in which you are working. Then there's always helps to have a system of incentives, some sort of financial support for the lead farmers to share the knowledge, and to keep in mind the component of gender inclusiveness in this, so that there's equitable training and also the selection of lead farmers allows women to participate fully and therefore reduce the gap in access for them. So having given all that context and background, what are the specific objectives of this study? So the overall aim is to find ways to effectively promote this new technology, push-pull technology, as an alternative to synthetic insecticides to manage the fall armyworm in maize crops in Uganda. And particularly our focus is going to be on Kumi, on the district of Kumi in Uganda, which is the site selected by our partner ICIPE. The specific objectives are going to be to test interventions that will combine the following three elements: demonstration plots and lead farmer training, the an ICT based support, which is going to involve giving airtime so to lead farmers so they can improve their farmer extension communication, and also to include gender sensitive approaches in the way that lead farmers are selected. And we want to assess the effect of this intervention on the adoption rates of the push-pull technology. So very briefly, a little information on the study area of Kumi District, which is located in eastern Uganda. It's about 300 kilometers northeast of Kampala, the capital. There are two rain seasons in the year, around which the agricultural seasons are located. The first season, the rains come around March through May, and the second season, the rains come from August to November. However, in recent years, dry spells and droughts have been very common, and this has increased the maize stress and the fall armyworm risk. In terms of the population, as you would expect, half of the population in the district is female, but actually surveys indicate that women provide 70% of farm labor, but they only control 30% of the land and hold or own actually only 7% of it. So there's a disparity there on who works the land and who controls or who owns it in terms of gender. The major crops in the district are going to be maize by far, cassava, millet, and there are also mixed livestock systems. So Kumi is very representative of the eastern Uganda's maize zone with a high exposure to the fall armyworm and also quite a bit of climate stress. So what's the design, the experimental design of our study? We're going to conduct a cluster randomized trial at the village level, meaning that we're going to randomize our interventions, our treatments at the village level as opposed to doing it at the individual level. This makes sense in our case because it's technology diffusion. We are working through lead farmers, and therefore it's very hard to randomize that at the individual level. It makes sense to do it at the village level. These interventions are designed to test the strategies that can improve push-pull technology adoption for management of the fall armyworm. Our sample is going to be comprised of 120 villages in the district of Kumi. We do some control for contamination, so that meaning that we are gonna drop villages that were too close to each other, so to avoid the treatment overflowing from one village to the next as much as possible. So we imposed a minimum separation of half a kilometer between villages, and our treatments are gonna be implemented there's gonna be 3 tiers that will address the input, the information, and the gender constraints. So what are these treatments? What are they gonna be? Starting with our 120 villages, basically we're gonna leave 30 of them as a control group, which we don't end up using much, and I'll explain that in the next couple of slides as well. And the other 90 basically are gonna receive the training to to select lead farmers, to learn about the push-pull technology, and to establish, for these lead farmers, to establish demonstration plots, and also how to use these demonstration plots for multiplication of the companion crops, meaning the desmodium and the bracharia grass. Then half of that group, around half, it's gonna be 44 of those villages out of the 90 are gonna receive, the lead farmers are gonna be provided with airtime, meaning basically their balance of available airtime in their cell phones to communicate, they are giving a small amount to, and this is meant to improve the communication the lead farmer has with extension workers, with field staff from ICIPE to troubleshoot the technology, to ask questions, to coordinate, and therefore just improve their access to support. And finally, the final element of our study is going to be introducing a gender inclusive lead farmer selection approach. So basically, half of the treated villages are gonna choose their lead farmers in, let's say, a business as usual way, which is general community meeting and selecting out of that community meeting the 2 lead farmers that are gonna represent the village. And the other half will be conducting a more gender inclusive approach, which is basically splitting the village by men and women, and each group selecting a lead farmer separately. So again, the village will still have 2 lead farmers, but this time one will be selected by women and one will be selected by men. I'll talk a little more about this process here. So why this is important, the lead farmers act as local knowledge hubs, and they connect extension agents and farmers, and therefore support the wider uptake of innovations like the push-pull technology. Now, the selection methods of how you choose the lead farmers have influence on how information spreads and who benefits according to several studies. And in our case, our gender-based selection aims to increase women's participation and roles in leadership, strengthen peer learning and social cohesion. It's easier, it's more effective for women to learn from other women that understand their context and their challenges and opportunities. And also to improve adoption by addressing these gender gaps in access to information and resources. So overall, this component will test whether inclusive selection enhances the reach and impact of the fall armyworm management. So in terms of the mechanics of this, for the groups that are choosing lead farmers based on this approach, the women and the men are separated at the meeting, and each group will nominate, in each group, potential lead farmers are nominated. So either by somebody nominating a third person or by self-nomination. The groups are not limited to choosing. So if it's the women's group, they are not limited in choosing a female farmer. They can choose a male farmer, somebody that is not present at that meeting, or they can choose somebody from the group. And basically, all the nominees then are asked to talk a little bit on why they would be good at the role of lead farmers, talk about a little bit about their farming experience, and just give a short speech, let's say, promoting their nomination, and then the group votes. But the key here is that when separated into women and men, then the women are able to nominate themselves without the influence of the men, as opposed to in the general meeting where, again, women can still nominate, but then the voting comes and not always the outcome will reflect their preferences. Just a little bit of a project timeline. This project has been ongoing for a while. If I recall correctly, we began the design and initial stage of the project by late 2022, and by around the end of the first quarter of 2023, we did some scoping visits, some field visits to finalize the design of the project. And in June 2023, we started our data collection with a village listing so we could assign the treatment at the village level. Then these meetings to select lead farmers that I just described happened between July and August 2023, followed by a baseline survey. And then from August to October 2023, the push-pull technology training for the lead farmers and also local extension workers happened. And this is part of the reason why I'm talking about the timeline. We're going to be facing some challenges throughout this period, and it influences how we are conducting the study. So I think it's important to mention that in November to December 2023, we distributed desmodium seeds and bracharia grass to the lead farmers. But as it happened to be, the drought that season was particularly bad. So the season was extremely short, and it was followed also by a longer and harder than usual dry spell. So this caused basically most lead farmers not to establish their push-pull plot. And so in April 2024, we went again, conducted refresher trainings, and again distributed the PPT inputs. And this time, between April and June, most and close to all lead farmers established their demo plots. And in September 2024, they were given a refresher training and also on vegetative propagation, so as to teach them how to basically use the desmodium and bracharia that they had to distribute to other farmers so they could adopt. Also, at this time they were given a airtime for those in the airtime treatment. And in March 2025, they were given a second provision of airtime. And then in June, we went and did a quick adoption survey. Now, the challenge here is that even in our second distribution of inputs that happened in April 24, that was still done in a context where the weather was drier than usual. There was still high risk of droughts and dry spells. So as it happened to be, a lot of farmers, even if the lead farmers were able to establish their PPT plots, they were under constant stress because of the droughts and the dry spell. And this was seen by a lot of the farmers in the villages, and they were hesitant to adopt, even though in every round of data collection and monitoring surveys, they were all expressing their desire to adopt. The conditions, they were very afraid of making the initial investment in preparing the PPT plot and then facing the bad weather that wouldn't not only not make the investment profitable in the present, but also basically they would risk the desmodium and bracharia not surviving the dry spells, and therefore not being able to use this in the long term. So because of this low adoption, we decided to conduct this adoption survey, which is specifically targeted to those that actually adopted, which are going to be a smaller number than we expected, and specifically target a survey to them as opposed to doing a follow-up on our original baseline survey that was conducted in August to September of 2023. So basically, this is more or less what I've gone through when describing the timeline. Additional challenges to the implementation of our interventions and of the demonstration plots uh, was that farmers willing to adopt, in many cases, were constrained by their availability of land. Also, the dry spells helped or made the plots more vulnerable to termite attacks, especially on the young Desmodium seedlings. And in general, as you all know, as everybody in our discipline is facing, we had some funding challenges throughout this later period. Now on to some results. This is still preliminary. We are still analyzing the data, but I wanted to share some preliminary results on what we found. First, out of the baseline survey, some basic farmer characteristics, so you get a rough idea of how this sample looks like. 22% of the farmers are of the households are headed by a female. Then on average, these households have around 7 members. Cell phone ownership is around 68% between household heads or their spouses. But when we look at this divided by gender, we see that in the case of men, the ownership is 86%, while in the case of women, it goes down to 52%. The average land size for these farms is going to be 3/4 of a hectare. And the maize harvest in the second season of 2022, very affected by the droughts and the dry spells, was on average around 52 kilos. In the first season of 2023, with the improvement in rainfall and weather conditions, it recovered a bit, quite a bit, to 332 kilograms on average, but still below the expected for a season in the region. Then, in terms of awareness of the fall armyworm, and other pests, the farmers, the respondents to our survey, were asked whether they were familiar to the fall armyworm, also to the stem borer and striga. Then they were also given a little photo test. So basically shown pictures of different pests and different insects. In the case of the fall armyworm and stem borer, and they were asked to try to identify each of them. And then they were asked whether they thought this particular pest represented a major constraint, a major danger to their maize production. So as you see, in all cases, the fall armyworm, people are very familiar with it. Their self-response on whether they know it is high, 96, 97% basically. And then when identifying it on the photo test, they also do very well, 99%. So basically everyone is able to identify the fall armyworm, and everybody identifies the fall armyworm as their main risk, basically, in terms of pests they are faced. Then from our treatment on how lead farmers are selected, we see the first line in this table is the characteristics of the lead farmers that were elected in the women-only sessions. Then below, the lead farmers that were selected in the men-only sessions, and then the lead farmers that were selected in this more general meeting, general assembly type sessions. And as you would expect, basically, in the women-only sessions, 9 out of 10 times the lead farmer selected was a woman. Men in the men-only sessions, they always selected a male farmer, never selected a female farmer. And in the general meetings, around 28, 29% of the lead farmers selected were female. So the majority were male, but females were selected there as well. So out of the 100 lead farmers in our study, we had 90 villages that where we did these sessions, either general assembly or separate male-female sessions. So in each of those 90 villages, 2 lead farmers were selected, so total of 180 lead farmers. 130 were male and 50 were female. Now on to some results from the impact evaluation of our treatments. When we look at basically how many adopters each lead farmer is generating, so how many farmers are requesting inputs from the lead farmer, requesting advice on how to establish their PPT plot from the lead farmer. We see that the treatment on how the lead farmer is selected, so the way the lead farmer is selected has no significant impact on how many adopters they can generate. The airtime treatment does have an impact. The first column here is just the overall number of adopters that lead farmer is able to generate, and we see here that it's almost 2 overall. In addition to if you see, look at the constant down the column. The average of 3.5 that they're generating, by receiving the airtime, they are able to generate 2 additional adopters. And when we break down this by gender, columns 2 and 3, we see that this is mostly driven by generating adoption among male farmers. We are still doing the analysis, but I think a good potential explanation for this is what we saw earlier here, which is the cell phone ownership rates. So the by gender. So the lead farmer with airtime might find it easier to communicate with other male farmers who have a cell phone, own a cell phone mostly, rather than female farmers who at least half of the time will not have a cell phone. Now, in terms of trying to explore a little how this is working, why is the airtime proving to be effective in generating adoption? We try to look a little bit about what lead farmers that will receive airtime versus no airtime have been able to do in terms of establishing their demo plots and being able to distribute the inputs, the bracharia and desmodium, to other farmers. And we see that there's some evidence that the lead farmers that receive airtime had more inputs produced that they were able to share. That's in the results highlighted in green. And you see that at least in more than half of the lead farmers that received airtime had enough PPT inputs for more than one plot, versus only 39% of those that didn't receive airtime. If we look at the characteristics of the farmers that adopted, separated by whether their lead farmer received or didn't receive airtime, we see that the farmers that adopted from lead farmers that received airtime are actually closer to the demonstration plots. That's on the line of the distance from demo plots. We see that the distance is 0.059 versus 0.087, and that's significant. And they also were able to plant the Desmodium and Berkeria 92% of the time versus 86% of the time if the lead farmer didn't receive airtime. So here and again, these are we are speculating a little bit on the reasons behind this, but to some extent we can consider that with airtime, a lead farmer is better able to coordinate and has more options in terms of who to disseminate to and can optimize their effort in terms of who he connects with, and it's being able to connect with those that actually have easier access to the demonstration plot. While without the airtime, the lead farmer might have to just rely on who he knows in the community and some other efforts, and he's basically widening his search for adopters. Then a little bit on the gender aspect of this. So the question is whether female lead farmers are as effective as male lead farmers, less effective, more effective. And the evidence so far seems pretty indicative that they are actually very effective. So female lead farmers are able, in this case, almost for any category, to double the number of adopters that the male lead farmers are generating. So first column, we see that on average, a male lead farmer would be generating 3.5 adopters, which basically the female lead farmer is able to add another 3.5 on top of that, so a total of 7 adopters. Again, the same pattern repeats when we break it down by female and male separately. And the ratio of female to male adopters, therefore generated by the lead farmer, also goes up quite a bit. Now, in practice, how does this look? It's not like we're saying it's not exactly that female lead farmers are doubling the output of male lead farmers in terms of adoption. Well, it's actually a very curious thing that is going on here, which is that a lot of every single female lead farmer we have in our sample, so the 50 of them, they are generating some adoption. The worst case scenario, they are just generating one adopter, but they are generating at least one adopter, and then some of them go on to generate much higher adoption. In the case of the male lead farmers, the ones that generate adoption are actually doing a good job, and on average, they are actually a little bit higher than the female lead farmers, the number of adopters they are generating. But what is happening is we have a lot of male lead farmers that are not generating any adoption at all. So basically, half of the male lead farmers are generating adoption, and they are doing it at a good rate. But then the other half are not doing anything. They are generating 0 adopters each, and basically that brings the average down. So it's more of a bimodal distribution of adoption they are generating. We don't know exactly the reason why. We still need to see if we have something in the data that tell us why this pattern is occurring, or if it's just how it is. But yeah, so that's why on average, then we see that female lead farmers are much more effective, and basically their output, their effort is more consistent across the distribution of lead farmers. Now these estimations here, there could be some concern that there's some endogeneity issues present, because basically you could claim that groups that are willing to select a female lead farmer might also be predisposed to adopt for some reason other than the effectiveness of the actual lead farmer. And to break down a little this endogeneity, we do the same estimation, but with instrumental variables, where we instrument the gender of the lead farmer with the treatments, with the selection methods, because basically, as we saw earlier, it's the it's the selection method of the lead farmer that is basically allowing female lead farmers to be selected. So here we see that the effects are there. Of course, this is an instrumental variable estimation with only 180 observations. So we are going to have less precision and slightly smaller coefficients. Which is why we are losing significance here, but the pattern is there. We still get significance barely on the female ratio. So I think and the first stage of these estimations is strong. So we are fairly satisfied that or fairly convinced that the gender effect is there. Now on to some conclusions. I haven't checked the time for all this, so I hope I didn't go for too long. There is high in this area. There is high awareness of the fall armyworm, but a low adoption of integrated pest management approaches like push-pull technology persists. The airtime provision improved lead farmer communication and boosted adoption, mainly among male farmers. Lead farmers with airtime produced more inputs and supported closer, more engaged adopters. Female lead farmers showed promise in reaching more adopters and improving the gender ratio of adopters. Adoption success is linked to communication, proximity, and gender inclusion. And some very preliminary policy recommendations we are thinking out of this is we should explore more the value of integrating ICT tools, airtime, mobile data into these extension programs, support and incentivize lead farmers for communication and input sharing, promote gender responsive selection and training to expand women's participation. One thing that is key, and that was also one of our main implementation challenges, is to strengthen local supply of the type of inputs these systems need, like the desmodium and bracharia, for consistent access, and to cluster the demonstration plots and the adopters together to improve visibility and peer learning. I think that's all I have. Thank you very much, and please, I'm happy to answer any questions or hear your feedback.